I'm here with Debbie, my better half. We want to talk a little bit about something that affects a friend of ours, someone who's been on the podcast, Congressman Troy Nehls, Fort Bend County, Texas. And he was on all over Twitter yesterday reporting something quite disturbing.
Well, he's District 22 Congressman. It's not just Fort Bend County. It's other Brazoria County. I think it encompasses other counties, not just Fort Bend.
Gotcha.
He was the Fort Bend sheriff of just Fort Bend, but he's a congressman for more than just Fort Bend.
So he reports, Troy does, that the Capitol Police Intelligence Division investigated his office illegally and one of his staffers caught him in the act. Evidently what happened is, this is November 20th, 2021, they entered his office without his knowledge, photographed all kinds of legislative diagrams and materials that were in the office. And Troy Nehls goes, this is all protected under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 6. And he goes, 2 days later, 3 intelligence officers, apparently disguised as construction workers, show up and they try to get into the office when the office is in recess. So a staff member comes up and goes, what are you doing? And they begin to question him about the contents of a photograph that they had evidently taken before. Now, Troy Nehls goes, Capitol Police has never informed me or my staff about the reasons for this investigation. And he goes, and this is, I think, the bottom line, maybe it's because I've been a vocal critic of Speaker Pelosi, the January 6th committee, and the Capitol Police. Now, the Capitol Police put out a statement. You want to talk about that?
Right. So I don't know how you say his name, Chief Tom Manger. Anyway, he basically says no case investigation was ever initiated or conducted into the representative or his staff. So he's denying the allegations.
He acts like the office was just left open and unsecured. So he goes, it's our job to look after these offices. And he said our only mission was to, quote, secure the office. But I think there are several anomalous elements here. First of all, if you're securing the office, okay, lock the door. Why would they be taking photos of all the legislative materials in the office? So that's the first thing that caught my eye. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, well, that's Troy's complaint is exactly that. Like, what were you doing in there taking photos? And then he also talked about some of them being dressed as construction workers. Right.
Well, that's the second point.
So and so he's like, why would they have to do that if they were doing something that was like legitimate and legal?
Well, it's almost like they're pretending like they're repairing the office, so that anyone passing by wouldn't worry.
But that in and of itself looks suspicious. If you're going to go in there and you're going to do a legitimate whatever search, which they really had no right to do. Then go dressed as Capitol Police. Don't pretend you're somebody else. That's...
Honey, here's our friend Louis Gohmert. This is Congressman from Tyler, Texas. And Louis makes reference to what happened to Troy Nehls. But he says this. In January, my staff received a letter from a Christian missionary, which was already opened and stamped DOJ mailroom. And he says, and also x-rayed on the stamp. And so obviously what he's getting at is that the DOJ is intercepting mail intended for a congressman and evidently reading it. And then he goes on to say, the Supreme Court has made it clear that the Department of Justice cannot use even a search warrant to search a representative's mail and office. So what Gohmert is saying is that this is a complete violation of separation of powers. And I think this is a broader phenomenon we're dealing with here. Here's an article in Politico. Now, this article came out a little while ago, but here's the title. Capitol Police examines backgrounds, social media feeds of some who meet with lawmakers. So this is after January 6th.
Right. So a constituent has no right now to talk to their representative without some kind of...
They start checking you out.
That's
even though you have no criminal record.
That's very troubling. Very troubling that we're going through this.
You are now vulnerable to a background check. Possibly, does this guy have a criminal record? Is he on probation?
Yeah.
And all of this is sanctioned. Now, what I'm happy to say is that the Inspector General for the Capitol Police is evidently investigating.
Good.
And that's necessary.
Good. They should. Now I have to say with Troy was there. He, in fact, has a photo. I wish I could show that photo, but he has a photo of himself with the, during the whole raid or whatever you want to call it. And the police officer that shot Ashley Babbitt was actually mishandling his weapon, and Troy was like, it was pointed straight at me. And so Troy has been very vocal about this police officer, saying that he did not use the rules of engagement when it comes to, shooting an intruder or someone that is threatening your life. And so Troy laid down all of the steps that you're supposed to go, I think 5 steps that you're supposed to take before shooting a weapon at somebody. And so he's been very vocal about this. And he's worried that is what is basically getting him,
And he has a lot of credibility, right? He was the constable, he was the sheriff. So here's a guy who knows the rules of engagement. Yep. And I think he's become a thorn in the side of the January 6 people and Pelosi. And so this could be, let's check this guy out.
I remember, he was going to serve on the committee and then he pulled out. So that too is probably sending Nancy Pelosi a bit of a red flag and saying, no, we got to check this guy out because he could be dangerous. Ooh.
Now, I saw this morning Troy put out a statement, but he basically said, look, if there's some investigation going on, and if these so-called, construction worker undercover cops wanted to ask my staffer about this picture that they took earlier. He's like, release the picture. Let's see the photo you took that you were asking about, and let's examine whether this is part of a valid investigation. I think the implication is it's clearly not. These are people snooping around trying to get information on Troy, maybe supplied to Pelosi. Let's remember the Capitol Police are basically goons at the behest of Pelosi. They're almost like her private militia at this point. Again, if the Republicans take the Congress, it seems to me, retaliation, and by retaliation here, I just mean investigation and expose of wrongdoing and punishment of wrongdoing is an absolute imperative. If Republicans do not do this, Democrats will conclude these guys are weak. We can keep doing this kind of stuff. We'll never be held accountable.
And their behavior is that very fitting of a third world country.
Very true.